Around the world, artists are using digital technology to speak their mind. These artists show us that a physical studio is not needed, using the virtual world to question the reality we live in. As part of Power Play, an exhibition championing the African digital art scene, we will explore how these artists create. These are some of their desktops.
Hi, my name is Debs. I'll go by King Debs, and I am a multimedia artist and designer currently based in Cape Town, South Africa. I primarily work the digital medium. That means I explore a lot of pixels in three-dimensional space, and I'm very much intrigued by movement and expression using the digital medium. I paint calligraphy and I write calligraphy, and I sample that and I infuse it in my digital workflow. Initially, it was playing around with paint and whatever, and then my journey with digital space started in college, really. Even when I was enrolling for graphic design, I didn't really have the resources to fully comprehend what it was. But however, I did have a curious mind. So by the end of the first year doing graphic design, I had already seen its limits. So I already saw a ceiling. So I decided to explore multimedia design. I ended up being much more intrigued about that, and I did a whole degree. And then in 2011 now, I guess I was thrown into the adult world to explore my career. We are faced with socio-political challenges just off the gate, right? So pertaining to the digital scene, it's one of those industries that are slightly difficult to get into because of the bar of entry, which is basic computer acumen, right? You find that there aren't a lot of there isn't a variety in the demographic, particularly in the industries or in the studios. People from a privileged background who may have been exposed to having a personal computer at home in the early mid-90s, which is a very small portion of the South African populace. And that kind of is a vivid reality that I'm faced with the further I dive into the scene or the industry itself. There aren't a lot of people that look like me or sound like me, and I guess that informs my expression. I don't think my reach is where it deserves to be as yet, so I got a lot of work to do. But as far as quality, I can definitely be firm on what I'm putting out as something that's solid and strong. But it's just that, balancing having to do projects and social presence and stuff like that. Where my name rings bells, it's pretty much with the right people. But I think I still have a couple of years for me to make a very big impact. And I guess this platform is one of those. I personally didn't have much capital boost to start this. Being able to just have a computer was good, a computer and Wi-Fi. That's essentially all you need, right? But now in South Africa, you're faced with people not even having access to data or Wi-Fi. The art world is also a bit forgiving in that way, whereby it's more about the message that's more important versus the aesthetic. It's all about doing what you can with as little as possible. And South Africa has a great culture of perseverance. As far as being able to kind of compete on international standards, we are very much there. This is kind of my portfolio side. It's kind of I'm finished. All of this work was conceived in Cape Town. This was the first work that I did where I kind of realized I could express myself using pixels. Was inspired by Carl Jung after I read his biography, and he speaks about anima. So this was kind of my take on what the anima is. Overall, this was the first time I was trying to visualize an abstract concept. concepts that are not really tangible, but seemingly are because the work is there. One of the pieces is actually up here on my site here, and it's called Ritual Dance. And essentially, this is when I was really also working out a new flow. I was converging like my physical work with my digital work, and it's basically 30-second animation. So that would basically play on loop. So this is a CGI film, completely computer generated. Yeah, it's someone in a trance state whereby they basically in between the physical and the spiritual realm, and there's certain steps I guess one has to take in order to transcend, so but yeah, it's very common for family members to engage, with the metaphysical world in some way or another, and there's particular individuals that have that gift. This is kind of like a contemporary take on that, and seeing how far I can push it with pixels, basically, which is like, it seems like the most alien thing to do, which is quite intriguing for me, because it's like the more we become like westernized and globalized, like how much of our identity can we retain? How much of that can we still like explore, So that's basically what I do. I would have wished for it to be longer, but this was like resource intensive, man. Like a 30-second animation is like months, just rendering one frame is like hours, and then there's the post-production and stuff like that. So you need like a very powerful machine, man. And also it's not like you're working on one thing, continuously. You're also like getting by. You got like other clients, other gigs that you kind of like, balancing and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, man, it's like, it's something that you believe in. So you fight to make it happen, This is a feminine figure, this kind of like speaks to the climate around like gender-based violence in our country. Then the numbers are staggering. We have a huge problem. I'm not going to be showcasing work in London and front like everything is all gravy. What it is, it's like there's a different way in engaging with these kind of conversations. As a South African Black male, I'm quite accountable in the statistics of gender-based violence, but all in all, it's the reality. So I guess like my work is kind of trying to engage in these conversations, so besides it being a technical piece, there's a lot of like embedded message in it. I strive towards like hyper-realism because I think it's the best way to contain my message, because I'm trying to touch on certain things that are even bigger than myself, so that's why I always look at my artwork as conversational. This aesthetic holds the gravitas of what I'm trying to say better than a stylistic output. So I'm down to go down the rabbit hole of what it is, to actually achieve a certain thing. Because once you are able to do like hyperrealism, you can dial down to stylized, versus like a stylized person, creator might find certain things challenging, balancing certain like qualities like index of refraction, because there's like a mathematical calculation behind the scenes, so I'm quite interested in that, trying to blur the lines between real and simulated reality, because that's where things are going, So this is my country. It's my favorite place in the world, and I'd like to love it also from a distance at some point. So this is the popular Johannesburg, and this is Pretoria, the capital city of the province of Gauteng. It's also actually been renamed Tshwane. There is a lot of colonial legacy in South Africa. Like these names are either Dutch or just like European names that we have really no connection to. Like even the name, we don't really have a name. It's just South Africa, and to someone else that's that sounds normal, but like if you're really in tune, that is not a name. That's just like a geographical coordinate. Now, this is also my other favorite place in the world because, yeah, man, like growing up in the township of South Africa. Yeah, so this is insane because this is my township where I grew up called UX. And yeah, man, this is my hood. It's so funny in Cape Town. I think it's kind of like the way people perceive strangers and whatever. People have like just a misunderstanding of where someone is from based on how they talk or how they present their work. And people don't really know this is where I'm from. This is how off the grid we are. This is like an old public phone booth. So that means like it's been years since like Google Maps actually made a round here because it doesn't look like here. This is before smartphones. And this is like a pub and there's like a pool table or snooker, depending on what you call it. You see this section here. This is where like the street homies like play dice or shoot dice. And this is where people like homies drink and whatever and just like listen to jukebox. There was a producer called DJ Mojava and DJ Spoko. In Pretoria, we grew up to our own homegrown electronic music before electronic music was even like a big term in the country. This is a car wash. This is like a quintessential element of like any South African township. So a car wash is like a culture whereby guys chill out, just like make sense of the hood, make sense of like reality and stuff like that. So this is where people learn to be entrepreneurs and be businessmen. And right here, this is a hair salon or hairdresser. And you'll get like music pumping from a car wash. This is a Venture. This is a Toyota vehicle, which is a local taxi. So this moves within the local region of the township. And this here is a Quantum, and this goes to town. So by the shape of the car, you can tell where it's going. So it's that, man. Like I can point every little corner of the hood means something, This is my hood, man. This is not even like a random place on Google Maps. And this is like a vegetable stand. You can see how like humble it is, but it is very, very functional. So we grew up in these streets, man. I grew up in these streets with little to nothing. And my house is literally like, I don't think Google had made it that far, but my house is it's literally like on that corner. The whole hood is an organism living and breathing and self-sustaining. If we were to like go inside the township, there's now other stuff there. There's a lifestyle there where people are making the best out of the situation. So it's a 2-hour flight from Pretoria to Cape Town. So usually like if you are from where I'm from, you would usually make it as far as like Johannesburg for work. The economy makes it very difficult for people to explore different avenues. So me just coming to Cape Town was a bit of a risk. And I was fortunate enough to bump into like amazing creatives that had been here long before me, that had like laid the foundation for like counterculture and just overall like alternative way of thinking. Most of the best galleries are here also. This is one of the most amazing spaces in South Africa because it's like an MPO. And I currently have a solo exhibition there titled Bukamoso. But this is what the place looks like right now. So I basically did that on the facade of the space. Yeah, it's just nice for an art space to be that vulnerable and welcoming. Digital work that has gone from digital to physical. This like all existed like in an infinitely 3-dimensional space. And for it to kind of like be transposed into the physical is quite an interesting conversation, It was beautiful to see the people that were there. This is another piece, and this is basically how I manifest in public. my presentation was kind of like trying to bring something familiar to the table. There is some form of like relatability and stuff like that. To be totally honest, like not a lot of people can tell, that these are digital. A lot of people aren't even in the art world or the CGI world. Some people are lawyers, some people are doctors, and they just love art. So it is also trying to have something that everyone can kind of like connect to, because I'm not speaking to like, a one-dimensional audience. I'm really into the idea of just like any man, woman, or child being able to see the work. So printing these, it's the best way for me for the where I'm at, resource wise. But I'm definitely gonna elevate how I present in the future. The transition between physical and digital, it's quite interesting, because at some point we won't be able to tell. And even if we do, like, what does that, how does that inform our daily lives and things like that? This is my primary engine. This is my core, Cinema 4D. I basically plug everything into here. And as you can see, it's like I have different cameras. So I set up a camera. So it's kind of like setting up like a photo shoot and whatever. And this is like the hair, that's the plane, which serves as the wall. It's 50-50, whereby, like, for example, I would work on a simulation. When I was doing my first year, ZBrush didn't exist, and second year it was barely like getting popular. 2010, it was like a household name, So seeing this level of detail on CGI was unheard of, especially from like a beginner to intermediate artists. So I do simulate cloth simulations, but I go and I do refine some of the simulations, because it's never perfect. And so I basically use the same character. I work between like two characters. I don't get to I'm not sculpting like the character every project. You know what I mean? I'm literally just like recycling because it's done. You know what I mean? It's a digital asset. I'll refine with certain things, and sometimes I'll find like assets online and stuff like that, on repositories and stuff like that. And for me, like the main thing is really like the message and the expression. It's not the how. As you can see, it's like this doesn't mean much. It's just like a character like in 3-dimensional space with cameras in a scene. That is the final render. Before post-processing, like before Photoshop. So this one is untitled. I'm into still like just this trance, interdimensional travel, that there's a glow into the African mask. It's contorting the body in a very like intense way. Life is movement, so I try to capture that and interpret that in my own way. As you can see, it's like it goes through stages, right? So like in the final piece, like this calligraphy is in the background of this, and it's kind of like all multi-layered within like one scene. The calligraphy, I would basically, do it in real life and then take a picture of that, and then digitize that into Photoshop and just kind of like assemble these, you know what I mean, and clean it up in order to make sense. So there's like creative license, whereby like you see there's a gap there, and it's like I'm trying to strive for like visual balance. I'm also like trying to find visual balance. You get what I mean? So this is basically one of those things that allows me to travel between the digital and the physical world, whereby, as you saw with some of the calligraphy on the facade of the gallery, I painted that in real life, and I can also do this and transpose it into the digital domain, and then bring it back out into like a physical thing. So I basically write like African proverbs in Setswana, which is like the predominant language of the area where I grew up. Tie fufa kamo swang is what this proverb reads, and it's like these proverbs sound very funny when you translate them, but it means, if I had to roughly translate it, it means one works better when they are nourished. which kind of sounds like a frivolous statement to say, but once you start thinking about like, mental health and just holistic well-being. So yeah, I write proverbs like that, and then I just readapt them in a contemporary way, man. So it's both street, it's both like, I guess, partly graphic, but I would like to believe like it's more street than institutional. Got an exhibition at AVA Gallery. Go buy my work at the gallery. So I have another show. Also, I'm busy, with this in the background. It's a virtual art, a National Arts Festival thing. Yeah, hit me up, slide in my DM, come buy some work. It's not just digital. I do a lot. You can commission me. I can paint walls. Bring me out to London. I want to collab with the homies down there. I would just say, like, take time off, listen to your inner voice,